Welcome to Linguistics News Hour, the show that answers all your questions about language. Today's topic is Focus on Form, or the teaching of grammar in the ESL classroom. There are two major schools of thought in this area, and so today we've invited a distinguished guest from each of these to define their differing views. With us today is Talal Al-Harbi, representing Focus on Forms, and Olga Sarmaz, who will discuss the different focus on form. So, Dr. Al-Harbi, can you explain to us and define what focus on forms means?
So basically, focus on forms means the way of teaching, the traditional way of teaching grammar. You basically select the grammar points that you want to teach and put them in the syllabus and, plan what you're going to teach in the class and teach them as isolated points. It definitely treats teaching grammar as teaching any other subject like math and stuff. It doesn't treat it as if you are learning your L1. So that's what focus on forms in a nutshell means.
Would you say that it's a traditional form of grammar teaching?
Well, some people do refer to it as the traditional way of teaching grammar.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Sarmaz, can you tell us what the difference is then of focus on form?
It's Dr. Sarmaz.
Oh,
Anyways, I digress. Focus on form differs from focus on forms in the sense that the primary focus in this teaching is meaning. So students, the learners, are learning the meaning of the language rather than the rules themselves, the grammar rules themselves. And so there are two ways to go about focus on form. One is through a planned task. You give a task to your students, and they have to elicit a certain grammar rule. For example, conditional. If you create a task where your students are running up for a presidential election in their classroom, then you would say, okay, please make sure you use the conditional to say, okay, this is what would happen if I was president of said classroom, right? So you have that kind of meaning, the meaning of conditional in this second language. Conversely, there's unfocused tasks and incidental focus on form, which is just, think of it as having a group discussion of a text in the L2 in the second language, and the students are supposed to discuss the text. They're supposed to give their own opinions on them. So you gain a more general sample of the language, but you're not eliciting a special form from the language. And so you might correct the students, you might give them feedback, but there's no form in mind when it comes to that group discussion. So that's where focus on form differs from focus on forms. It's all about meaning, not necessarily the grammatical rules of the language.
Very interesting. So would you say that focus on form is more of a task-based incidental to what your main focus of teaching is?
It's both. I think when it comes to teaching, you have to have both planned and incidental learning so that the learner can effectively improve within time. So both.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Talabi, would you like to add anything before we close?
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
Very interesting. I'm sure our viewers have learned a lot about this topic and are much clearer about the differences between these two different approaches to teaching grammar. We'd like to thank our guests for being on the show today. Thank you, Dr. Talabi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Sarmaz.
Thank you.
Back to you, Bob.
Who's Bob?
Who knows? I can't turn it off.